Hey everyone, it's Sevi. Hoyoverse has a new gacha turn-based RPG, Honkai Star Rail, set to release in April, and it stoked a lot of interest and curiosity from players of other Hoyoverse titles, primarily Honkai Impact 3rd and Genshin Impact. I got access to the second and the ongoing final closed beta test, so in this video I'd like to walk you through my thoughts on Honkai Star Rail so far, especially from the point of view of a longtime Genshin player and creator. I'll be discussing various aspects of the game, how they compare to Genshin, and the overall experience. Before getting into it, some quick disclaimers. Since these thoughts are from the final CBT, some things may still change or get added for the global release. This video is also sponsored by Star Rail, but all the thoughts and opinions are completely mine and 100% honest. That said, if you are interested in the game, you can pre-register for it on the App Store and Google Play on mobile or through the official website on PC by following the link in the description or pinned comment, and it'll help out my channel too. So with all that out of the way, let's board the Astral Express and warp into Honkai Star Rail. The first and most noticeable thing about Star Rail is that its user interface and progression system are very similar to Genshin Impact's. In Star Rail's gameplay screen elements, the quick access icons, minimap, team lineup, and such have a nearly identical layout. Same goes for the character menu. The first page is for stats and leveling up. Light cones are the equivalent of weapons. Traces are like Genshin's talent page, but now it's a skill tree. Relics are basically artifacts with 2 or 4 piece set bonuses and randomized stats, though here there are 6 slots instead of 5. And finally, Eidolon is the equivalent of constellations. As for the progression system, instead of world level and adventure rank, you get Star Rail's equilibrium level and trailblaze level, which you earn experience for in various ways. For your daily activities, there's a resetting assignment and various character building objectives, like spending Trailblaze power to farm materials or equipment. And the gacha system is almost exactly the same. There's a beginner's discounted banner, though Star Rails guarantees a 5-star in 50 pulls, which is nice, the standard banner, limited character banner, and limited 5-star light cone banner. The corresponding equivalents for Fates, Primo Gems, Genesis Crystals, and Paimon's shop are also present. The similarities don't stop there, but you get the idea. It's very familiar. So, is this a bad thing? Do these similarities make Star Rail just a copy of Genshin Impact? In my opinion, the intention is to make it very easy for Genshin Impact players to get into Star Rail. Personally, one of my struggles getting into a new live service game is figuring out navigation, currency, and progression systems. The way I see it, Star Rail tries to remove that entry barrier for its major target market, the Genshin player base, allowing them to get right into the main difference that Star Rail offers: its turn-based gameplay system. In contrast to Genshin's real-time action, Star Rail features turn-based combat, where teammates and enemies take turns casting abilities and dealing damage. This alone might put off players who simply aren't fans of turn-based games. But if you're a newbie or mild dabbler in this genre, I think Star Rail has a very accessible and casual turn-based format. There are layers to its combat, but it's not super deeply layered like more complex turn-based games are. At least that makes it more palatable to a general player base, which I think is the intention. To give you the gist of it, here's a quick rundown of how it works. You battle with a team of up to 4 characters. Each character can do a basic attack, which gives you a skill point, or cast a skill, which costs a skill point. Skill points are shared across all teammates, which makes it an important resource to manage by deciding whose skill to use and when. Characters also have ultimates, which have special effects and flashy animations, but cost energy to cast. Whenever a character does an action or takes damage, they regenerate a certain amount of energy. With full energy, they can cast their ultimate at any time, even outside of their turn. So it also lends more strategy to the turn-based combat loop. Additionally, characters have passive talents that can translate to additional effects or extra actions outside of or during their turn. The more actions a character is able to do, the faster they can recharge their ultimate. Throughout a battle, everyone's turns are sequenced according to their speed stat. The higher their speed, the sooner their turn goes. This makes characters' speed stats and related buffs quite relevant. If Genshin asks for some level of reflex and movement techs, Star Rail is more about strategizing your turns and the impact of your actions. There's thankfully a fast forward and auto battle function for repetitive, easy battles. In more meaningful fights like bosses and endgame content, that's where you want full control. I think harder battles are challenging enough, but are still on a manageable level with enough thought and character investment. By the time I got to Trailblaze level 30 and I finished the Shenzhou chapter, I was still doing very well full with the free characters and a few that I had obtained from minimal wishing, but that difficulty level might escalate later on or in endgame content. Another important mechanic is the weakness break. Enemies have elemental weaknesses indicated by the icons above them. Attacking enemies with the corresponding element will lower their toughness bar, like shield breaking. If depleted, the enemy will be in a weakened state, and depending on the element that broke them, the enemy receives additional effects and damage, like getting frozen or burned. Exploiting these elemental weaknesses gives you a tactical advantage. Even before going into battle, using a weakness attack to initiate combat immediately reduces their toughness bar and gives you an upper hand. Since mobs have different enemies with different weaknesses, you're encouraged to create teams that have diverse elemental coverage. One more crucial aspect is character paths, which is the familiar RPG class system. Different paths specialize in different roles, whether that's dealing damage, shielding, healing, buffing, or even debuffing enemies. These paths further guide how to build your team, as you need the right balance of combat and survival capabilities which various paths cover. And like in Genshin, each character's kit is distinct, and finding how they work with different teammates can make things exciting. For example, I like to use this pair of Clara and March 7th, who have destruction and preservation paths respectively, because these characters exploit the mechanic of counterattacks. March's skill applies a shield to her allies and increases the chance of the shielded ally being targeted by the enemy. When Clara gets hit, her companion Svarog will deal physical damage to enemies via a counterattack even outside of her turn. But March also does a counterattack when an ally with her shield gets hit. It becomes this loop of counterattacks that can deal a lot of damage even outside of their turn, while also taking minimal damage. Genshin's elemental reaction system isn't present here. Rather, Star Rail's team building is centered around covering elemental weaknesses and synergizing your party's kits and paths. And so, collecting units of different paths, elements, and strength levels lets you overcome battles against different enemies and levels of difficulty. This shouldn't be a surprise for a gacha game. The appeal of current and future characters, whether for their visual design or combat potential, will entice players to pull more. There is a function to temporarily borrow characters of other players, and when someone uses your character, you even get a bit of currency in return. This is only available in material farming battles though, but it at least makes regular tasks easier, allows you to try characters you don't have, and is the closest thing to multiplayer the game has so far. Anyway, if you want to put your teams and strategies to the test, Star Rail currently has two forms of permanent and repeatable challenge content. The first one is the Simulated Universe. It's a sequence of multiple stages and battles where you can get buffs and change your team at certain points, much like many of Genshin's limited time battle events. I particularly enjoy the Simulated Universe for being a longer challenge, and it has various rewards that refresh on a weekly basis. It also has its own store that offers 5-star light cones and wishes, which is a good incentive to keep repeating the challenge. Then there's the Forgotten Hall, equivalent to Genshin's Spiral Abyss. Each stage is a single battle, and you get stars by completing objectives, such as finishing the battle in X amount of cycles, or having no more than one character die. Completing the stages gives you material rewards and currency, which you can also spend in its separate shop. For now, these permanent modes feel sufficient, but that could also be because there's still a lot of story and character quests to complete, and that will run out eventually. Of course, these will likely be supplemented by limited time events, but I am curious to see how sustainable it will be in the long run, and if Star Rail will try to spice it up later on. On the topic of story and world building, I don't want to say too much for fear of spoilers, and also because it might be too early to really judge the writing of it. But basically, Star Rail's story arc sees you and your companions trailblazing through worlds, getting tied up in their conflict, and uncovering the mystery of Stellarons, these seeds of ruin that are affecting those worlds. It sounds similar to Genshin, but obviously with more futuristic space elements. So far, it's engaging enough to keep you wanting more, especially because it draws you in at the start with epic cutscenes and interesting characters. You're motivated to unlock more areas and meet more of the playable characters throughout the main quests. While it does borrow names and likenesses from the Honkai Third lore, Star Rail's story is standalone and doesn't require any prerequisite lore or knowledge. The world of Star Rail will feel familiar to sci-fi/space fantasy lovers, and coming from Genshin, the art style is familiar as well. It kind of feels like you're just jumping into an alternate universe. However, the way you traverse this universe isn't like Genshin's open world. Instead of a huge sprawling map, you have smaller connected areas, so traversal is a more linear and two-dimensional experience. There's no jump or climb function in Star Rail, and interacting with the environment is mainly about investigating objects, opening chests, solving puzzles, or talking to NPCs. Star Rail's world isn't one you can spend hours and hours in completing exploration, though there are checklists for areas. It's really just more of a setting in which to ground the story immersion, encounter enemies, and farm stuff in. So if you're after an open world game, Star Rail isn't one, but it does make Genshin and Star Rail feel easier to play at the same time. If both were open world games, you could go crazy trying to explore every nook and cranny of both, and your storage space would suffer too. I also particularly like the dynamic of the characters and the level of interactions you can have between them. Star Rail gives you multiple permanent companions in your journey, which also gives way to more dialogue and banter. Characters also have their own side quests, and if you finish them, they actually visit you in the Astral Express. It's a nice touch that lets them have more presence, which I wish Genshin also implemented. The various characters' connections and developments are a large part of what I'm looking forward to in Star Rail for the long run. Oh, and one more thing I'm thankful for is that Star Rail has a bunch of quality of life improvements that make farming and leveling more convenient. For one, if leveling XP overcaps, it actually gets refunded. Genshin has this for weapon ores, but Star Rail has this for character XP, light cone XP, and even relic XP. There's also a material exchange function where you can turn materials you have into ones you don't have, instead of farming them from enemies. Think being able to turn slime condensate into Nobushi guards in Genshin, or turning oceanid drops into hypostasis drops, which can save time, effort, or trailblaze power. More than anything, these minor but welcome quality of life features make the game feel more casual and easier to manage. These are things that Hoyo probably learned from Genshin, and now I wish they were also available in Genshin. At the very least, it's nice to see them implemented as immediately part of Star Rail. I haven't touched on other aspects since I want to keep it concise. But for now, how does Honkai Star Rail feel, especially to a longtime Genshin player like myself? First of all, this doesn't really feel like it's meant to replace or kill Genshin, but to be played alongside it. If you are a Genshin player that feels like you don't have much to do in Genshin anymore, picking up Honkai Star Rail could scratch your itch. It opens up more variety for players who are invested in the Honkai Genshin Hoyoverse. By itself, Star Rail seems like an accessible entry point to turn-based RPGs because of its straightforward gameplay mechanics. If you are a veteran of the genre, you might find the combat mechanics here relatively vanilla, but if you want something casual but stylish and strategic enough, I think this is worth checking out. But more than its gameplay, it captures the epic space fantasy vibes it's going for. I'm personally curious to see where the story goes, and there are a lot of characters to simp for and enjoy. So upon its global release, I plan on picking it up to play alongside Genshin, and we'll look forward to how the game and its community will grow in the long run. I'd love to know your thoughts on it in the comments, whether from watching this video, your own CBT experience, or from watching streamers try it out, and if you think you might pick it up when it comes out. That's going to be all, so if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!